Welcome to another segment of the Business of Aesthetics podcast. I'm Michael Walker, your host for this episode. Before we get started, I want to thank all our incredible listeners from the United States, Canada, and around the globe. We couldn't do this without your continuous support. A special thank you also goes out to our sponsors for this episode, Equa Marketing. With nearly 20 years of experience, Equa Marketing is a leader in digital marketing services for aesthetics practices. They are offering our listeners a complimentary digital marketing consultation, which will include a tailor-made 12-month digital strategy for your practice. Just head over to www.businessofesthetics.org. You can do that after our podcast, and you'll be able to book your consultation. I just want to let you know that there's no gimmicks attached to that. There's no tricks. It's just simply an opportunity for you to be able to introduce some marketing thought process, some best practices into your business for 2025. And what better way to start the year off with great innovation, which is what we're going to get into today. So without further delay, let's dive into our theme for today, which is permanent hair removal. Why is the multi-probe galvanic electrolysis method so successful? And joining us today is Alana Zurich. Welcome, Alana. It is great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Now, before we get any further, let me share a little bit of your background with our listeners. Alana is the founder and CEO of Beverly Hills Hair Free and a licensed electrologist with over 27 years of experience. Alana began her career in New York City at the Berkowitz School of Electrology in 1995. Alana has spent years researching electrolysis modalities and the entire hair removal industry, from temporary methods like shaving and waxing to DIY gadgets to lasers and home electrolysis kits. She has devoted her entire career to finding the most effective, low-cost, pain-free hair removal treatments with the most rapid results. From her extensive research and endless search for the absolute best solution for permanent hair removal, the Beverly Hills Hair Free system of permanent hair removal was born and is now recognized as a gold standard. Powerful. You have done a lot of things, Alana, to get to this place. That's very obviously very rewarding for you to have found something and developed something that has made such a difference in people's lives. And I'm so grateful you're going to share that with our listeners today. So let's just go ahead and just jump right into some questions. If that's okay with you. I always like to start out with, I love to get a little personal. And so the first question I have for you is, can you share with us what was the genesis of your passion for aesthetics?
Honestly, it's probably not as interesting as you would think, but I came from the corporate world. And I was in my early 20s and in New York, Manhattan, and I hated the corporate world. Hated it. But I got a lucky break when my company filed for bankruptcy and I got laid off. And I thought, you know what? I don't like the corporate world so much. I'm going to segue and try and find something I really like. And I took a leap of faith, had no idea what electrolysis was. There was a school in Queens, the Berkowitz School, and I went in and looked around and something just sang to me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put a deposit down and I'm going to try and see what this is. And I absolutely loved it. I loved the fact that we were students, Michael, so we weren't great, but we had people who spent hours at the clinic and we got to actually see this amazing method called electrolysis, which is a permanent form of hair removal. So having completed I believe it was a couple of weeks course, I started my journey. I graduated and I rented a little space and I started doing electrolysis. But I got to be honest with you, the method that I learned is not the method that I'm using today. Because today we're going to talk about multi-probe galvanic electrolysis. And what I learned as a student was a one single probe method. So you had to remove one hair at a time. And I couldn't figure out how this system worked. For example, well, first of all, I'll say that when you come out of school, and I'm sure this goes across the board for every profession, whether you're a medical student, a law student, it's really up to you once you graduate to then figure out how you get to the top of your career. So that's exactly, what happened to me. I graduated, and what they showed me wasn't what I was seeing. When I left, I couldn't really tell my clients, okay, you're going to need this many treatments and then you're going to be hair free. It was painful, the process itself. And I didn't really like messing around with one single probe at a time. It took forever to clear an area. So fast forward 2.5 years later, I got married and moved to Maryland, and I met my mentor, amazing teacher, pioneer of the multi-probe galvanic system. So I moved to Maryland after I got married, and I had to enroll in another school because for electrolysis, the requirements are different state to state. So New York is an unlicensed state, and you can basically take a class and start practicing. Maryland was a regulated state where you needed to go get licensed. So I enrolled, and back then, Michael, there was no internet, no cell phone. So I had to look for a school using the old-fashioned method, the yellow pages. So I come across this woman, and she frightened me. She scared me. She was an incredibly strong individual, but she showed me this method, and I knew that this is something that I really wanted to pursue. She taught me everything I knew about the multi-probe system. She was kind of the pioneer. Well, not kind of. She actually traveled with the gentleman who made these devices back in the 60s and 70s. And so she was in her 70s when I connected with her, and she told me, Alana, this is going to be your moneymaker. You're going to be able to treat people, and you're going to be able to give them treatment plans and tell them how long it's going to take for them to get permanent hair removal results. And so I stuck with it. She gave me my first job, which I was so grateful for. And then I opened up my own location. That was back in 1998. So when I say I've been in the industry 30 years, I have, but I've only been doing multi-probe for 27 years of that 30-year career, because the first almost 3 years, I struggled badly using single probe methods.
Yeah, and that sounds very, listening to you talk about being painful. That got my attention right away. But it's interesting how it's evolved and how you've moved it. I have to ask you the question, like if you're, can you share with us like a, a favorite story you have about regarding a client you've had and the treatments that you've offered and how it's impacted their lives? I'd love to hear just a little bit of the obviously in the multi-probe world, I think.
Yeah, sure. So, gosh, there's so many, but I can remember one that's both funny and incredible at the same time. I had someone come to my office and tell me that they're terrified of needles. Now, I don't even like to use the word needle when we talk about multi-probe because it isn't a needle. Where that phrase comes from is the original method way back in the early 1900s. They actually did use sewing machine needles because technology wasn't where it is today. Luckily, we've transitioned and technology has moved very quickly. And today we use a little filament. It's made from a wire and it's the size of a hair. So when people say, oh, you use needles, it's not accurate. We do not. It's a tiny little filament called a probe, and it's used because it conducts electricity. And I'll tell you a little bit about how the system works after I tell you this funny little story. So the woman comes in and she's terrified needles, and she says, "Can I see what you're using?" And I show her these tiny little probes, but she's already so worked up. And I said, "You know what? I'm really sorry, but I can't treat you." I just don't believe in people that are so nervous and scared doing a long session, because it isn't going to work for either one of us. So I asked her to go home and really think about it. And it took about a good 6 months. And then I saw her on my books one day, and I asked my employee, "Who is this person?" She said, "You remember her? She came in and she was terrified of, needles." And I said, "Oh my God, she scheduled a 4-hour treatment. Oh, she's not going to last past an hour." She did, Michael. And the entire time she tolerated it, and it wasn't what she expected, and it was incredibly comfortable for her. And she thanked me after, and she said, "I remember you telling me that you're not ready for this and you need to prepare yourself because it's a process and a journey." And she did it. And she's
Wow.
very grateful, and I'm very grateful, because those are the kinds of clients that I enjoy working with.
Well, you think too. I mean, not only did you give her the benefit of the treatment and just how that impacted her, but just her ability to process something that created fear, and she was able to overcome and work through that. I mean, it's like that. It's really you're like you're doing what I do. You're like a leadership coach.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
the I now I'm curious though with the treatments themselves and what are sort of some of the when people have gone through treatments, what are the big aha moments for them? What kind of things would you hear from clients?
So I will say that a lot of our patients come to us, clients, after they've had a number of other methods done, whether it was electrolysis, single probe, whether it was laser, whether it was waxing or, shaving, temporary methods. A lot of our clients will tell us that electrolysis didn't work for them. They'll tell us that laser didn't do what they expected it to do. And I do understand that the frustration is because, look, not every client is a client for laser. For example, if you have gray or white hair or even reddish hair, the laser's not going to treat you. You're not a candidate, because the laser tracks pigment. And if it can't find the pigment, it can't destroy anything. So those people are stuck, basically. Electrolysis is great for any type of hair, any skin color, because we're not interested in what the hair looks like. Electrolysis focuses on the stem cells located inside the follicle. So some of the stories we heard are electrolysis didn't work because a lot of other professionals, and I myself was guilty of this the first 3 years that I didn't really know what I was doing, is you can't put the client in charge of their own treatment.
Mhm.
And that's what a lot of people do. They ask the client when they want to come in, how much time they want to spend in the office. The client's not the professional. They have absolutely no idea. But if that's the case, then of course they're not going to get results. It's kind of like a transactional treatment plan. You come in, you exchange, a treatment for or a service for money, and then you come back when you feel like it. And so there is no end in sight. We've received dozens of emails like that, where people have been doing electrolysis for 3, 4, and 5 years, and they still have a ton of hair. Um, Laser clinics, and I don't even know if you know what laser really stands for. So laser is an acronym, and it stands for light amplification for the emissions of radiation.
I did not know that.
A lot of people don't know that. So I didn't make that up. They named it and they gave it an acronym, right? So laser uses photons, and it tracks the pigment, and it does get absorbed. A portion of that gets absorbed in our skin and our blood supply. And sometimes it can cause the opposite effect. It's called paradoxical hypertrichosis, where you start off with a little bit of hair and you end up with a lot more. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that laser doesn't have its place. I'm not knocking it. I'm simply saying that there are cases where this happens. And so my goal is to educate the public that if you're not a laser candidate or you don't want to do laser, or now you've learned that laser isn't permanent because it's not. Laser was never cleared for permanent hair removal. Then multi-probe galvanic electrolysis is your alternative and your solution to real permanent hair removal.
Interesting. That's, I mean, that very new information for me, Alana, and I'm sure for some of our listeners as well. And you've kind of set the stage now for the question I wanted to ask you. No, recognizing our theme today is permanent hair removal, which is what we're just talking about. And then why is the multi-probe galvanic electrolysis method so successful? Would you go ahead and just unpack that title for us, please?
Yeah, I'm so happy that you asked me that question. So, really, what electrolysis means is converting salt water molecules. That's the technical definition. So, what happens when you get the multi-probe galvanic treatment is a tiny little probe is inserted into each hair follicle. Now, remember, we use up to 32 of them, so we can clear a significant area. Once that little tiny probe is inserted into your hair follicle and the current is released, it mixes with your own salty tissue and it creates sodium hydroxide or lye, Lye. Now, lye is incredibly caustic and toxic, but if you picture your follicle, it's kind of like a test tube, right? So if you inserted the probe into your follicle and it's charged with an electric current and it creates sodium hydroxide or lye, it destroys the stem cells inside your follicle that are growing hairs. Knowing now how our method works, if you think about how laser works, it's a completely different technology. So one is permanent and the other one is not permanent. And it's because of the way it works. So once your stem cells are destroyed, the follicle is dormant. It can never grow another hair. And additionally, what happens with multi-probe galvanic is the regrowth rate of the actual process is so minimal that while other methods have a ton of regrowth, our clients aren't coming back to manage the regrowth. They're actually getting permanent results. Is it a one-time thing? No. You have to come back for a certain amount of sessions. And I know you're probably going to ask me how many sessions does it take? And I always tell my clients that it really depends on everybody's physiology. That is the thing that we're trying to figure out now. How come some people are very quick and they can achieve results in under 6 months to a year, and then other people take about 18 to 24 months. And it all has to do with what's going on inside your body.
So the thing that you talked about the size of these probes being so minute, and you're talking the multiple probe structure of your process. Can you unpack that a little more? I just better understand that.
Yeah. So the reason that we need to use probes is in order to enter the follicle, you need a filament that's the size of a hair. And literally, hair can be as small as, tiny little millimeters. So, in order to not break the skin and slide this tiny little probe down the shaft of the opening in the hair follicle, you need these things to conduct the electrical current. Otherwise, there's no way to get that mixed with the salty tissue inside the follicle. So, if you want to picture, let's say, a test tube, I'm going to give you a visual here, and the test tube is filled with water. If you throw a live wire inside water, it gets electrified, but it's not going to create any sodium hydroxide because there's no salt. Our bodies are amazing conductors of both electricity and we have natural salty tissue. So I didn't invent this system, but a doctor did. And this is the most incredible combination of the human body and something so natural as electric current coming together to create sodium hydroxide to give you permanent hair removal results.
That's amazing. Thank you. I'm a visual learner, so thank you. You gave me a
Me
word.
too. And this is why I worked so hard to develop these analogies and actually teach, this training class that I have in Dallas, because most people are visual learners. And if they can't see it, they don't understand how it works.
Absolutely. And yeah, the rest of them, they're the ones that are kinesthetic, that need to touch stuff. That's is obviously helpful in the classroom. You get to actually try something out. And I'm intrigued that you just brought that up about the class. Tell us a little more about that. So you're obviously doing training on this and education.
Mm-hmm. I know for myself, just like you, we're both entrepreneurs, that you can't just open a business and you know everything from the minute you open it to, fast forward for 30, 40 years from now. You're obviously not the same person and you don't know what you're doing when you first start. So I've literally taken so much from the business world that I came from to streamline the way the process works for a client. So picture this. When and I'll get back to the school in a minute, but I'm going to tie this all in. When a client comes in to see us, or we don't even need them to come in, basically they reach out to us, and we have clients all over the world. We are international, by the way, as far as Dubai and Australia and New Zealand and Norway, Puerto Rico. I don't know if there's a client I haven't had over the last 30 years from some part of, the remote universe. Um, when they call us, they're desperate for results. That's how they find us, from somewhere in, Australia or New Zealand or Norway or Dubai. It's not ideal for them to travel, but they're willing to do it because they've tried other things and it just hasn't worked. So when they contact us, what we ask for is, we want to know what's going on. So basically, it's like going to the doctor and the doctor taking your history. What have you done? What have you tried? How come it didn't work? Tell us your experience. Once we know what they've been through, and we ask for photos because we want to see what we're dealing with. Sometimes the client has a different view and idea of what a lot of hair to them looks like, but because we do this all day long, to us, a lot of hair may look very different. So we want to make sure that we are on board with the client, that we're seeing the same thing they're seeing. Once we look at their photos and we can assess it, we develop a treatment plan. If they're going to stay with us for 2-3 days, we try to, get them their money's worth, because it can be expensive to travel from another part of the world. Once we can develop a treatment plan based on their needs and their location, we talk about that, and then we offer pain management options. So we can make them completely comfortable. We partner with a bunch of, in different locations, anesthesiologists and doctors who will inject them with lidocaine, numbing agents to keep them comfortable for up to 6 hours. And so they never even feel a thing when they're seeing us for hair removal. Once we develop the treatment plan and we agree, we start their progress. And so I've never been taught to do that. And I had to figure this out all on my own, partner with doctors, knock on doors and ask for these professionals. Let's combine our services. People don't want to be put under anesthesia because it's incredibly expensive. And putting somebody under anesthesia takes time to then shake it off. But if we can numb the area and do localized numbing, that's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't everybody do that? So those are just some of the different ways that, our method is different. And so what we teach, and I have a program in Dallas that's about 200 hours, and it takes about 4 full days of hands-on training. And the last group of students that came through here, the trainees, they were exhausted when they left, but they had a ton of information. And it's a hybrid program, so it's 2 or 3, I believe it was 2.5 days online. And then we go into the training and I show them every trick that I've learned. And like I said, I came from the business world. So I wanted to streamline multi-probe galvanic electrolysis. I wanted it to work like clockwork. I want my staff and then anybody that I train to be able to look at somebody and say, if I apply these things that Alana taught me, this person's going to be hair free in this amount of time. And so it's been incredibly rewarding for me. I always say I can't be everywhere, but my system can be anywhere.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, Alana, pardon me. I in my world, as a leadership coach, we coach what we call influential leadership, which is a definition of influential leadership is giving somebody something they don't even know they need or want.
Oh, wow. I
Once
love
they
that.
have it, but once they have it, they can't imagine live without it, and then they can't wait to give it away.
Hmm.
And that's really what you're talking about. As you
Absolutely.
said, whether it be the patient who doesn't really know what they want, they do want something. They know there's a hair thing, an issue here they're looking at, but they really don't know what they want. They just they're looking more at the why of how they want to be different downstream, whatever that looks like. But I hear this with the training. You obviously have a passion for raising up people to be trained in the practice and in the process. But if somebody was starting an aesthetics practice,
Hmm.
what would you have to say to them of encouragement on what would be important in terms of starting? And you've obviously alluded to your entrepreneurial background and business background, which is it's interesting you say that because often somebody's strong they might be strong in business and which is great, but they're not great in the relational side, so they don't really do customer service well. Or conversely, they're really medically well trained, but they don't know how to run a business. So we know that there's these unique dimensions in business that we need a team to deliver. But in terms of somebody starting out and looking at what should they be doing and how should they and incorporate what we're talking about? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I definitely think that somebody who wants to succeed in business needs to look into absolutely everything. If they're coming from the business world and they're not so versed in aesthetics, then they obviously need to learn a lot about the aesthetics world and vice versa. I've seen so much, um, very little overlap, and so many people in my industry who think they know what they're doing. But here's the other thing, we have a great social media following. And the one thing I learned, because I have a business marketing background, is if you're going to go and just get followers, and I see a lot of this going on, they're doing TikTok dances and they want to get their, 6 seconds of fame. That's great and wonderful. But is that really necessary for your business? What's the message that you want to get out there? So I think there's so many things that I've learned and so many things that are important for people who get into aesthetics. There's also something called, the life cycle of a business. And I know you know that coming from being an entrepreneur, where you have to reinvent certain things because, and I'm going to tell you this, I feel like laser hair removal, I don't know that they're going to be as busy as they've been the last couple of years. And I'll tell you why. We see a lot of consumers that have had laser done and they're very unhappy. And I've gone through a bunch of social media with laser companies and looked at their comments. And clients are very unhappy. And they're unhappy because they feel like they've been lied to and they've been told that it's permanent. And they're not getting either one of those things. They're not getting honesty and transparency. And they definitely didn't get permanent hair removal. So, what do I think is important? I think it's important for people getting into aesthetics to be honest. People will do the laser hair removal if they know that at some point you may have to go and get electrolysis done if you want permanent results after, which is totally okay. Sometimes if somebody has a ton of hair, we'll say, you know what, you might want to start with laser, get that taken care of, and then come back when you have half the amount or, a quarter of the amount. So I think it's great to be honest with yourself because I got to tell you, Michael, when I first started out, and I told you this, when I learned electrolysis, the first 3 years I struggled and I said to myself, I'm walking away. I'm not going to lie to my clients and give them a bunch of garbage, hoping that they'll stay with me because I'm not doing this for the money. The reward comes when you're actually people. And so that's been my motto is that I tell my students that if you're chasing that dollar, you're never going to do anything because it's always going to be about the money, not the treatment.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, I can see, Alana, that's your heart. I think the word we've gotten so wrapped up in our culture, with success being defined by financial parameters almost exclusively, or how many likes you have, or how many followers you have, which is there's, but I think what we've lost sight is the essence of prosperity in the context of a more holistic view, which is what you're talking about. That it is financial, but it's also relational, it's also physical, it's also emotional, and arguably, for whatever it looks like to you, it's spiritual. But I think this whole idea that getting into it just for the money, for a season, you'll get something, but in the long run, that personal satisfaction and the passion that you had about people and making a difference in their lives gets lost. And in my world in coaching, they end up in my office at 40, 50 years old saying, can't figure it out, but I just feel like there's something missing in my life. And that's kind of usually what.
Right? That is so true. And you know what's interesting about what you just said is if you would have told me 30 years ago that this is where I would be, I would have laughed at you because I wanted to be, the boss of the business world and I had no idea what I was going to end up being. And I tell people every day there was no oh, I'm so passionate about doing this. I'm going to go and get my license and I'm going to remove hair. That wasn't even on my radar.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think that's the being clear. What you sort of talked about setting for somebody new coming into the practice, looking. I mean, it's so important to have a vision. What is it that is both transactional and relational? Transactional in the sense of what you do and how you do it, which is what we're talking about in terms of some of the technology and processes here. But what we're also talking about is the relational side about who you are and why you matter. And
Mhm.
but those two spaces have to kind of be brought together where the creative space comes out, which is where we as entrepreneurs know that that's where you have outside the box ideas. That's where you can have courageous conversations. That's where risk is, and but that's also where great return on people is, not just return on investment. And
Absolutely.
I think that's I love it with the school and with what you're doing in the school, and then with your advice with entrepreneurs. I kind of want to go to just a thought process, thinking forward and looking. We're 2 weeks away from the sun rising in another year, 2025. My goodness. Um, and we start looking, and you look at your industry and you look at what's happening. And what are some of the trends or developments that you think will shape the future of the aesthetic industry? So obviously, you've mentioned the laser aspect, maybe looking at a different flow moving forward. It certainly seems that way given some of the advancements that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I don't have a crystal ball, but I think you'll agree with me that with things like, PRP, where they're using our own, uh, cells and regenerative medicine, these are all on our horizon. And so we're finally starting to understand that instead of doing synthetic things or unnatural, inorganic things, people, the consumer, and they're smart. They've tried it the other way, and they are starting to do all of the, red light therapies and the PRPs and the microneedling. And that's where I predict our future is going to go because those things really work. Um, they work incredibly well. And I think that wellness is going to be our focus for 2025. And with that said, the wellness component, there is nothing about multi-probe galvanic that is inorganic or unnatural. Think about it. This is electrical current, right? And people might say, well, it's electricity. Yes, but we're great conductors of electricity. When our heart stops, they paddle us with electricity to restart our heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not invasive. It's complementary.
No, correct. And the fact that our own bodies are amazing conductors of electricity, we already have salty tissue. There's nothing that needs to be added. Coupled with multi-probe galvanic, you can achieve permanent hair removal in any given place, whether it's in, Dallas, Texas, Beverly Hills, California, or anywhere around the world where you have this technology. And that's the most amazing thing ever. That excites me, is that yes, there are other methods, there are other options. And, the consumer is free to choose. But I really think that someone who's struggled and has done all the other methods and they really do want a form of permanent hair removal, this is right here. We're here. You can get it done. And it's totally achievable.
Absolutely. And I think I recently was had another podcast. We had a conversation. We got talking about the difference between anti-aging
Mm-hmm.
and thoughtful aging.
Mm.
And the idea of anti-aging being, that it's a bunch of trying to do different activities to prevent it. But it also, in this case, this was focused more with women. It's also anti-aging is about causing people to measure up to some standard, which isn't necessarily valid or true or necessary. But in the thoughtful aging, it's about how do you really see yourself? And you just said it. If in the context of wellness, that
Mm-hmm.
holistic wellness, what does that look like for you? And things that you can do that are not that are not drug induced or some of
Yes.
these, as you're saying, some of these things that we take and do. I know my wife manages a chain of health food stores, and so
Oh.
I'm very familiar with all kinds of natural supplements, and I was the biggest poo-poo of the whole thing. Just give me my aspirin. But when I discovered the power of natural supplements and how simple they were, my eyes were open. But I think it's folks like yourself, the caretakers of the industry. The question is, how do we make sure that people are aware that there are choices that are less invasive, that are healthy for us, and advance that kind of holistic wellness perspective. And if I was kind of building on that, what is your thought when you think of when a patient or a client comes in when and you're looking and you're treating them and thinking about wellness the way we just talked about, Alana, what is it? How do you see approaching that with a patient or with a client? What does that wellness for 2025 we're talking about look like to you?
So moving forward, we are definitely looking into some red light therapy. We do offer that, but on a smaller scale. So after treatment, we have aftercare product. Now, if a client's doing 6, 7, 8 hours of hair removal, they're going to have scabbing. Okay. And that's just the natural way our body heals. I just want to get it out there and let the public know that everybody is different. I, for example, when I have anybody work on me, I'm very scabby. I'm very light skinned. It takes a month for me to heal, which is normal. We're all different. I have some patients who they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never gotten a scab. So we're all unique and different. And that's where physiology plays a role. But the red light therapy can reduce your healing time by half. We also have a product that comes from Australia that a colleague of mine makes, and she's also an electrologist and does the same multi-probe galvanic in Australia. And we recommend that our clients use this product twice a day to heal their skin. And if you think about it, there's been such a push because people are very unhealthy. Let's face it. I'm in my 50s. I've always been into health, but I'm not going to eat nasty stuff. So I think when it comes to people of my generation and my age, we understand that our food has changed and our lives have changed and our diets have changed. And so we're starting to get back to, like you said yourself, with the vitamins. We know what the other side looks like with the fast food and no exercise and working yourself to death. So we want to go backwards. And when I say backwards, I mean back to when we were more holistic. And I think that the younger generation is catching on. So there's not a lot of convincing our clients that this is what they should be doing. But I will tell you that they're very curious because they want to know what I'm doing. In my 50s, I feel amazing. And honestly, there are natural hormones that our clients in their 50s should be looking into, vitamins, minerals, and therapies. Like, let's talk about ozone therapy, red light therapy, cryotherapy. All of those things are natural and they actually reverse the aging process and give your body what it needs. So we're going to be focusing on a lot of natural holistic stuff moving into 2025 to add to our already multi-probe galvanic electrolysis, which is absolutely natural.
Alana, thank you for that. And I think as I was just going to think, if I was to summarize kind of some key words that have come out of our conversation, the words that kind of come to mind for me is about intentional awareness, being aware of your body, being aware of what's available, not just accepting what you know, but what is it you don't know? And that leads me to
I'm
kind of
writing that down. I love that. Intentional awareness. That is so powerful, Michael. Thank you for sharing that.
you're welcome. And then the next piece to me is the wellness piece. Wellness, but wellness not from a prosperity perspective, from a holistic perspective that includes all the aspects of how we live our lives, financially, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. And then the third piece to me is holistic curiosity. I think that's the phrase. It's about looking at yourself through a lens that's not being pushed on you to look at, but the one that you choose to look at yourself through. I think some of the stuff I noticed on your website just how diverse you are in your client group and in the audience. You've clearly made it. You've done everything you can to be a wide entry point to holistic wellness, and I just I'm excited about to see where you're going to go with this, Alana, and watching how you evolve. But we're kind of running out of time, so I'm gonna wrap up. But I just want to finish with I got one question, and it's how do you stay motivated and inspired in your work? What does that look like?
That's a great question. Um, I really enjoy people. I am a people person. I love to learn about my clients, and they actually motivate me. It's so interesting because when a client leaves and they're so grateful because now they have half the hair that they started with, or they're now, coming in and they really do, for 3 stubborn hairs that won't go away. And they're so grateful and they express their gratitude and say, how much I've helped them. it's not fair because I've met so many amazing people over my 30-year career, and I've cried with them. We've laughed together. I've been through hard times with them, and vice versa with me too. Um, so, what motivates me, how do I stay motivated, is honestly, I never know what I'm going to get when I come to work. Never. Um, the other thing that motivates me is I really want to leave a legacy and impact the hair removal industry. And I am a little bit unaware of how much I've done that, although a lot of people will, say how grateful they are for the classes, the training, and that I've helped so many people. But to me, I kind of feel like that's not enough. I want to put us on the map. And we recently did an infomercial that we developed with Brandstar for the Balancing Act with Montel Williams, or he's featured on there. So I'm just grateful that after all these years, no one's been able to go mainstream, and we finally did it because it's something that works. It's actually a really interesting process. And I don't know if you've watched any of our videos on YouTube or Instagram, but I started posting some time lapse videos, and people responded really well and said, "Man, I could watch this all day. This is great."
Hmm.
So that's kind of what motivates me. And I just know there's so much more that I haven't tapped into. I don't really know what's going to happen in the next 20 years for me, but we have two locations. We partnered with, I'm going to plug them because she came to the training, and it is Electrolysis and Company in Gilbert, Arizona, that also uses the Beverly Hills Hair Free system, and they're rocking it out there. So I hope to get more people interested in this, and then, go help everyone that needs hair removal.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Totally. Yeah, I love your how you're approaching that. It's interesting. It doesn't really matter what you have in your hand, um, unless unless it has a purpose that's bigger than you. And
I
I
love
think that's
that.
what I hear you saying. I could just see that. And I think that's what's some people say, well, how can you find that kind of thinking in something like we're talking about with electrolysis? I said, well, it's not about electrolysis. It is ultimately in terms of hair removal, but ultimately it's about helping people experience the best version of themselves that they want. And
100%.
I think I just want to thank you so much, Alana, for joining us today and talking to us about your journey and getting us inspired about where you're at, how new folks can get involved. People can. I know that I'm going to ask you now that just as far as your website you'll find it online is www.beverlyhillshairfree.com. Is that the best way for people to get a hold of you and reach out to you?
They can. There's an inquiry on our website. They can fill an inquiry out if they have a hair removal question or they need hair removal. That's the best way. And we have, like I said, two locations, and then the Gilbert, Arizona location. Another way, they can reach out to us through social media. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Instagram, and TikTok. And we have quite a following on Instagram. We like to post our videos and everything we're doing. We also have a YouTube page. My goal is to educate the public. I've built some amazing partnerships and alliances with medical professionals and anesthesiologists. And I think it's so important to spread the word. And I got to tell you, Michael, some people who call us, they're desperate. They've tried everything. They've been let down by every hair removal apparatus and company you can possibly imagine. And that breaks my heart because they can't get to us. They can't travel, or they don't have the finances. And we've done some work for free for people that we feel, would benefit from it. And I donate my time. I think it's important to give back. And so if they have a question, even professionals, when they reach out to me, I love to help them. But I often say, like, if I would answer all your questions, then why would people want to pay for the training? It's not fair to the people that have paid for the training, you know? And it's unfortunate because some people have such a small mind mentality that they just can't understand how vast the universe is, and that there's no way that you could possibly treat every person in your lifetime.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, no, it's the world's so huge and social media, everything's so huge. I always said I was taught training. My whole thing was about with like in my coaching company before I sold it was all about I would giving away my best. So in that I earned the right to ask for implementation, and
Hmm.
it was really about and that it matters. There's they never have a shortage of customers if you're willing to operate from that perspective of giving uh, before receiving, so to speak. Uh, Alana, what about you mentioned about the training and the course. If somebody was interested in getting, is that on your website as well?
Yes, they could reach out through the website, and we would give them all the information. We post our training classes online, so they'll be able to get a schedule and they'll be able to attend. And then, like I said, it depends on the state because some states require licensing. We do not license anybody. But if they are already a licensed electrologist and they just want to learn the multi-probe galvanic system, they can enroll in our training program. If you're not a licensed electrologist and you're in a state and it's up to them to do the work, there are 14 unlicensed states in the US. And then internationally, they have their own qualifications. So everybody's different, whether it's state to state or internationally. They would just have to know what they need. And as far as licensing, like I said, we don't do that. All we do is we train them, we give them a certificate that they went through our program, and then they would get their devices and they would be on their way. And we don't just let them go and say, bye bye, see ya, thank you for coming. We stay in touch. I stay in touch with everyone that's gone through my program. I want to know if they need help. I want to know if what we're doing is working. I'm a big believer in reevaluating things that don't work and fixing it and continuing to do the things that do work. And like I said, the biggest thing we're working on right now is to educate the consumer and to educate the electrologist and the aesthetics world. Because when I mention what I do, a lot of people go, I've never heard of that.
Hmm.
So can I make a prediction?
Yes.
I predict that a lot of laser companies are going to start looking into electrolysis because they're leaving a lot of money on the table, and the clients that are coming to them and not getting the results are frustrated. So if you have a client that isn't making progress with laser, switch them over to the multi-probe galvanic system. You could still retain that client. You already have them. And if laser didn't work for them, now you can get them permanent results. So that's my prediction. Unfortunately, they don't understand the world of electrology, but I think that that's going to take a little bit of time, and they will. The consumer's smart. And after dumping all the money into temporary methods, they don't want to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars to just have to keep going back for touch-ups. We don't have a lifetime plan because our clients actually achieve permanent results.
And there is the home run. Alana, thank you so much for sharing with us today and just and being with us. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate every one of you. And a big thank you also goes out to our sponsor, Echo Marketing, who are experts in digital marketing for aesthetic practices. Don't forget to make use of that offer that I mentioned, the free digital marketing consultation, by heading over to www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM, and you'll be able to sign up for that. And again, as I said, that is just their way of helping provide support. There's no gimmicks there. Certainly, as an organization, they can provide ongoing support, but the goal is to give you something that will help set up 2025 for greater success than perhaps otherwise. if you like our podcast, please make sure you share with your friends and colleagues, and please don't forget to leave us a review. We love reviews. They are awesome. So please do that. And thank you for the privilege of your time. Thank you, Alana, for being with us today, and wishing you all an amazing week ahead. Bye for now.
Thanks, Michael.